Welcome to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and I help deeply caring equestrians create emotionally balanced horses with science, empathy, and feel. This podcast is a safe place for anyone who desires a better future for horses and for the equestrian lifestyle. I hope that you will enjoy these solo and collaborative episodes where we enjoy a deep insight into our horses' worlds and ways in which we can make that better for them. If you love horses and are willing to do right by them, you're going to love this podcast. And I thank you for being here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. This is another solo episode, which is going to continue to be a thread throughout this podcast because, as I've said earlier, it is important that I continue to carve out space for my own voice, not just space for others and not just space for community, but space for myself in my own work. That's really important because I'm trying to model for other service providers, equestrian service providers, and others, how important it is that if you are self-employed, that there's space for you inside your business as much as there is space for service. Anyway, so to digress from that, I am here today to jubilously announce that I am presenting to you today the world's first perfect podcast episode. Really, truly. I know that might sound dramatic, but I really have found the perfect, or as close to perfect as you can, podcast episode. It's also really easy. It's also really fast. And it is guaranteed to be appreciated by absolutely everyone in the equestrian industry. This episode will be appreciated and respected by everyone from a classical dressage rider to a competitive Western rider, all the way through to ranchers, backyard owners, non-ridden horse owners, owners of mini ponies, even owners of donkeys might appreciate this podcast episode as the perfect podcast episode. Now, I haven't started this episode yet. I will tell you when it begins shortly, but I'm going to deliver this perfect episode to you, and then we're going to discuss why it's so perfect. Okay, so sit back, enjoy wherever you are in the world. If you're mucking out your pastures, if you're driving somewhere or just sitting in your own house, listening to this episode, I come to you as the perfect podcaster, the perfect professional, giving the most perfect episode. The perfect episode begins now. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips, and that was the perfect podcast episode. Stay tuned for next week as we continue episodes exploring the Emotional Horsemanship podcast. Oh dear, I think I might have failed at the perfect episode because I'm fairly certain there are going to be people listening who will already be angry at me. They'll feel like I'm being mean or I'm trying to make people upset. They will feel that I've announced something which I didn't receive or deliver. Sorry, I apologize that by delivering what I hoped would be a podcast episode that would be perfect, that I have failed in delivering the perfect episode to you, because for some people, irony is a grave sin. Irony pokes fun, tongue in cheek at things which are incongruous and pokes fun at illusions and tropes and patterns, tongue in cheek. I'm here to be myself, and already being myself today, I've been facetious and ironic because I've always been facetious and ironic. That's my sense of humor. So I tried to deliver the perfect podcast, but I realized I've just failed because someone out there is already rolling their eyes thinking, oh, yeah, okay, silence is perfect, right? Lockie, you can't say anything right. Yes, you're exaggerating, they'll be thinking. They might be thinking or feeling that, listen, Lockie, if you just improved your tone of voice, if you just improved the subjects that you spoke about and stopped speaking about controversial subjects, if you were easier on people and easier on the problems that perpetuate this industry, you wouldn't piss off so many people. So, that, Lockie, we're not asking you to be quiet. We're just asking you to say better things. We're just asking you to be better for me. There'll be people out there who will listen to what I write, what I say, what I teach, and there'll be part of them that respects what I'm doing, and there'll be part of them that will seek to poke at me and say, but if you could just do it like this, it would be better for me. So do it like this so that it's better for me, because it's not better for me. I like the message. I want your information. I want your information. And so because I want your information, I perceive that I own how you deliver it. And so I am entitled to ask you to change your delivery so that it's better for me. Not taking into account the potential that the information they're getting is from an individual, a human being who is equally as human, just as them. And I am going to deliver information according to the content of my character, whether you like that or not. That's how I roll. Now, you're free to dislike that. I'm not trying to please you. You're free to not align with that. I'm not trying to align with you. I'm trying to align with myself. That's what this is all about. And if you align with me, great. But I don't want you to throw your agency at me. I want you to align with me, next to me. But don't glom onto who I am and lose yourself in my identity. You see, this episode is inspired by the great postmodern 20th century music composer by the name of John Cage. Now, if you know, you know. John Cage was a classically trained composer, meaning he could compose orchestras, he could do all of that. But he became so disillusioned with traditional musical establishment that he evolved himself as an artist into something he called postmodernism. So he wasn't modern because composers like Stravinsky and Prokofiev, they were described as modern. But compared to Stravinsky and Prokofiev, John Cage was postmodern, what happens after modernism. So I consider myself on some degree a bit of a postmodernist, a bit of a postmodernist, a bit of a contrarian, a bit of an ancientist, because I'm trying to not reinvent the wheel. I'm trying to make the wheel work. I'm not trying to discover anything new. I'm trying to uncover ancient truths. I'm not trying to be modern. I'm trying to move past modernity in horse training. So that's who I align with. Now, John Cage used to do fascinating things, such as pour screws, nails, and ball bearings into grand pianos and see how that would change the sound, which gravely upset traditional establishment because how could you desecrate an instrument like a grand piano by pouring nuts and bolts and ball bearings into the inside of it and then play it? He used to fill baby upright pianos with water to see how that would change the way music sounded. What he was interested in doing is doing the same things in the same places, but trying to change the way it sounded, trying to get people, artists, to think differently about music, to feel differently about music, to explore other options. And for that, he was hated and loathed. So one day, he created a famous performance. Now, music theorists out there, please fact check me. I believe the performance was called 4 minutes, 39 seconds. Let me look this up. John Cage, 4.5 minutes. Google will tell me very quickly. It was called John Cage's 4 minutes, 33 seconds. And you can find this on YouTube. He would walk into an orchestra hall, which is a grand establishment where people pay money to sit down and listen to symphonies and things of this nature and concertos. And he sat down in his tuxedo at a grand piano. He opened up the grand piano, opened up his music sheet, and he sat there in silence, not playing a single word, turning the page periodically for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. At the end of 4 minutes and 33 seconds, he closed the piano, got up, bowed, and walked out of the hall. There are many different ways to say F you. That would be one of them. Now, I happen to like the subversive nature of this. For some people, they roll their eyes and they're like, oh, it's too much irony. It's too much contrarianism. It's too much combativeness. It's too whatever. And I get that. I do respect people who think and feel that way. However, I happen to love people who shake up the norms. I happen to love people who challenge establishment because I think that's how change is made. And I'm finding it interesting to grapple with this path I'm walking right now. Something shifted for my business when my social media channels went above 10,000 on all of them. So Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube all went above 10,000 within the same 3 to 6 month period. And they've continued to grow. And I'm exceedingly grateful for that. I've worked very, very hard to build my business step by step on my own until very recently on my own. And I'm proud to be representing what is a niche subject and for some people a controversial subject. I'm proud to be representing horse people for whom I believe are gravely underrepresented and underserved. And I'm proud to serve you. I've worked very, very, very hard to be where I am. And what comes with a larger platform is more work. The more work I have, the more job security I have. And so my gratitude for that extends to the job security I'm able to lean into. It's not fully secure like a salary job with good conditions is, because I'm still self-employed. And if I don't put in, it doesn't come out, right? But as someone who survived poverty, as someone who lived on less than 10,000 USD in an annual year when I was living in Eastern Europe, that was my salary. Less than 10,000 USD was my salary in Poland. And this was during inflation. So inflation was occurring. And yeah, there were times at the end of the month where I was on rice and beans. I didn't buy snacks for 10 years. It was basic groceries only, poverty shopping, beans, rice, vegetables. I even went off meat because it was too expensive, and I remain mostly a vegetarian slash pescatarian to this day. So just letting you know that when I speak in this manner about my business, that I don't perceive myself to be someone who is entitled to everything I have more than what I have actually worked for and earned. I've had a lot of help, but I've worked very, very hard to be where I am. And then I worked, and something about being a small time service provider with a smaller platform, something about that was on one hand liberating and on one hand restraining. The restraining was I needed more work, I needed more clients, was struggling to get that because I wanted to provide a better life for my horses, for my family, for myself, and just couldn't do that because I needed more work. And so that was the part that was holding me back. But the part that was good was that anyone in my business was usually, not always, usually deeply invested as much as I was and was known to me, more familiar. And I could give people a lot more intimacy. And with that intimacy and that deeper connection, because I had lower numbers, so I could actually spend more time with each person, um, there came a level of ability to discuss harder things with more ease, both publicly and individually. I could speak with a more harsh tone or a more, let's say, direct tone towards harder issues.
Let's take a break. People ask me all the time, how do I begin learning about emotional horsemanship, Lockie? Well, I can give a complex and an easy answer to that. The complex answer is that we have many points of entry for all budgets, all learning styles, and many different types of horse people. The only prerequisite is that you care deeply about horses. You could listen here to free conversations with my friends and colleagues, read my posts, watch my YouTube channel, or you could subscribe to my video library and see over 200 videos and 2 new videos posted every single week. But the easy answer, how do you begin learning about emotional horsemanship? The easy answer is the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. Emotional horsemanship is not like natural horsemanship. That's a common misconception because there are elements in emotional horsemanship which are inspired by all sorts of horse training, including classical dressage, intrinsic, bodywork disciplines, and many different Western riding disciplines. And some elements in emotional horsemanship are purely proprietary to it. I've done a lot of inner work on myself to feel brave enough to actually say that emotional horsemanship is a method, and some of the methods in it are proprietary to it, meaning you won't find them elsewhere. This is the most important first step to learning how emotional horsemanship could teach you how to emotionally balance your horsemanship and your horse. And that first step is to study the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. This humble little course is under 4 hours in length, and you get lifetime access to it. It is the course that changed the life so far of thousands of horses, and I never expected to see more than 15 people there. It's also changed my life too. This year, the entire course is getting an upgrade, and you will get access to that new version as well. Click the link in the description of this podcast to sign up for this course, or go to emotionalhorsemanship.com and navigate to the Emotional Horsemanship Foundation online course. Now, let's return to this conversation.
Publicly and individually, I could speak with a more harsh tone or a more, let's say, direct tone towards harder issues. And if you scroll back through my social media back to years 2020 and 2021, even down to 2019, you might see some of those posts are still up there. I've left them for posterity. But as things started to grow, what started to happen was I'd
post on something directly according to how I felt, and a commentator would pop up. And now everyone's going to tell me, don't pay attention to the commentators, don't do that, don't do that. And I understand that sentiment, but I don't think that's helpful because it is important. As a service provider, as a self employed person, it is important what you put out in the world and how that's received. That is important. I can't make myself immune to the way I have an impact on others. I can't do that. I can't separate myself from that. I am interested in others and their experience. And the experience others were having based on their behavior, and usually these were people I'd never heard of before, so a random name would pop up in the comments section across all platforms that would do some sort of equivalent of hen pecking me back into position. Would be these little microaggressions and sometimes macroaggressions, and sometimes extremely covert microaggressions that would, in some capacity, manipulate me out of my message or attempt to manipulate me out of my messaging, make me wrong for holding those opinions and that viewpoint, and then in some capacity, ask me to shut up, change my messaging, alter it to suit their liking, their preference, their taste, or make me an enemy outright. An example happened today. I made a post about patience on Facebook, ironically, because I'm an ironist. Ironically, this post about patience was one of my longer written pieces lately. Now, I've built a business on the back of writing long opinion pieces because my business started as a blog where I wrote about my training and my work locally. That's what it started as. Writing has always been an outlet for me, and one day I'm going to write a book. I probably already have. It's just spread out on social media. Now, this person someone I never met before, left a comment that said something like, "It sounds like you have good information. Although I don't have the patience to read it all, perhaps you could be more concise." And I thought, how interesting. In a post about patience, someone without patience comments on it. And in a post about patience, I require someone to have patience to listen to it. Now, my response was something to the effect of, sounds like we're not in alignment with each other because all my life I've been told to think less, write less, say less, be less. And all my life, every time that message has come my way, it's never worked because I'm not less. I am who I am. And maybe that's more than your capacities allow you to hold for. So I will not change my messaging to suit you. By the way, I didn't have a relationship to this person. If I had a relationship to this person, I would have altered my message for them. I would have wrapped it up in 2 sentences for them because I know them. But I am not going to give myself in that manner to people who are not entitled to know me with that level of familiarity. Familiarity. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. That kind of interaction is reserved for people who I know. I will not do that, and I will not embark on these homework assignments for people who I don't know. And it's a fascinating phenomenon because this is just one example of things which happen all the time once you start to step out into the public. Now, I know a lot of friends and colleagues of mine who I think could probably change the world. And I mean, change it better than I could in a way which is more graceful than I could. But they don't want to because they really have discerned that being out in the public, being visible in the public, is not for them. And I used to wonder when I was engaging with clients privately, I used to wonder when I was coaching and teaching these people, and I was seeing client after client after client being terrified to make mistakes in my presence, being terrified to share themselves, to be honest, be open, go deeper, share with me the nuance of their experience, and let me know who they are, and to take up space and to take up some of my time in explaining who they were to me. And
to make a mistake. They were terrified of it. And I'm like, where this isn't me. I said, "Oh, what kind of teachers have you had?" And they would say something to the effect of, well, I've had difficult teachers all my life. But I still didn't really believe that, because most of the teachers I've met, they are just trying to get by themselves. I didn't realize how common it is to be raised in families, societies, cultures, and communities for whom making mistakes is seen as the ultimate sin. I didn't realize that this was a common human experience until I shimmered up into the public above 10K in my social media, and people started commentating. Now, when these commentators show up on my pages, I go, so you're one of those people that makes my clients afraid of making mistakes. You're one of those people that is perpetuating this fear of mistakes onto others, because you're trying to make me, these commentators are trying to make me afraid of my humanness. They're trying to make me afraid of my imperfections and my mistakes. I didn't understand where this common thread was coming from until these commentators started trying to henpeck me back into position. And I thought, I bet next to that person in their family, they've got a son, a daughter, an auntie, an uncle. There will be someone associated with that individual commentator who is terrified of making mistakes, and they are the reason why. I bet you. And guess what? In the face of it, I refuse. I was raised by two almost completely fearless parents who gave me a long leash all my life to make mistakes and to explore what happens when I do and to learn from them. I was blessed to be raised by two parents who gave me the ultimate gift of radical independence and responsibility in my decision making from a very young age. As soon as I could begin to form coherent thoughts about myself, they enabled me to make decisions. When I was 11 and 12 years old, I chose what high school I wanted to go to. And when I decided to change the high school, that was my decision, that I self-motivated, came to my parents and said, I want to go to an arts college. And they said, okay. And then I was at that arts college and I self-motivated, I want to move to Europe because I have to if I want to be myself. And they said, okay, well, let's see how we can facilitate this for you. Now, they would help me in making those decisions. They would make sure I'd researched it. They'd make sure that I knew the costs and the expenses and the sacrifices involved. They made sure that they were part of the decision-making process, but they didn't take that decision-making away from me. So I've never been afraid to make mistakes because I know that I will make them and I'll learn from them and I'll grow from them. And I didn't realize that that wasn't normal until I went out into the world, got just a little tiny, tiny, tiny public platform, and realized that out there in the world, we are surrounded by covert brutalists who will punish you for your mistakes everywhere you go because they are unforgiving of their human imperfections. And so they resent you for acting out your human imperfections in real time. I think it is probably one of the most toxic human social cultural phenomenons that is across all boundaries. We find it in the equestrian sphere. Of course we do. It probably exists in every human sphere that you can travel to. Probably, though I don't know all things. I'm not all knowing and all seeing, right? I just think it's a really common toxicity that we need to develop our ability to root out in real time, because it is not the point that a public service provider should be racing after public opinion, trying to please everybody. And it is not the client's point of view, entitlement, or right to be demanding that every service provider that they come into contact with, even briefly, is supposed to not challenge them, is supposed to not extend them, is supposed to adhere to their whatever narrative they have about the world, because that is impossible to achieve. It's impossible. You're asking the impossible of us. So, what is the solution here, guys? We have got to encourage
our service providers to be themselves. Instead of asking your local whomever to serve you or the local community better, encourage your local service provider, equine service provider, to be themselves. What does that look like? Let's say you've got a farrier locally whom is trying to serve and please everyone locally. What could you say to them at your next appointment that would help that service provider feel safer with you? Such as, hey, I don't need you to rush this appointment. And if my horse, who's a little bit behavioral, is challenging you, I am willing to pay you for your time to be patient with them. Now, that doesn't mean your farrier is going to enjoy that, but at least you're extending an invitation for them to be safer when they're around you. And it'll make your horse safer as well. How about you've got a local dressage instructor who has decided to revolutionize their program, and they're going to move back from forcing horses to be sport machines for their clients, and they're going to move into something they hope is more ethical. Now, as they move into that space, this local dressage instructor, I'm actually describing a real story, guys. This isn't abstract. I'm just leaving the names out. This local dressage instructor, as they're exploring their newly found more ethical voice, has to take some very hard decisions with their clientele. Those decisions might include full diagnostics and x-rays for every horse in their program, or you can't join their program. This might involve clients not riding the horse before they've ridden the horse, because they've got to feel, as the professional, that that horse both has physical, mental, and emotional capacities for the work the owner has destined for it before they allow the owner to continue riding in their program. Now, this person I'm speaking about has pissed off everyone locally to them. And one of these local people is a dear friend and client of mine. And I never encouraged my dear client and friend to be critical towards my colleague. I said, do you know how brave they are for going out on a limb professionally, even if they're pissing off everyone locally to them, because they're calling their local community higher. They've decided that their local dressage community is at a standard which is unacceptable for them, and they're doing the bravest thing you can imagine, which is risk their financial and social freedom and well-being for the betterment of the horse. Now, instead of asking them to go back down, instead of asking them to be more palatable, for you, how about you lean in and say, I see you're doing something really difficult and really challenging. How can I help you? That's a tough message. It's even tough for me to hear, but my comfort is less important than the horse's well-being. So I'm willing to partner with you. How can I help you? Can you link arms with me? Link arms and lean back on me. I'll support you. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be encouraging local service providers to being more honest and more direct and more themselves, and supporting them in that journey rather than holding them back for some sort of bizarre conservative ideal. That's my opinion, guys. And maybe my opinion upsets some people. And for that, do you need me to set another 2.5-minute timer and sit here in silence so that I don't annoy people? Because the only way to not annoy people, the only way to not make enemies is to say absolutely nothing. The minute you open your voice, the minute you start taking action, the minute you start stepping up to serve, teach, support, guide, and even learn for yourself, you're going to be met against people who will try to stop you. Even a private horse owner who is going on a learning journey and is starting to do things differently with their horse. They're in a livery and boarding barn, and every time they do something differently, everyone around them feels that it is a personal attack for them to be doing something differently with their horse, minding their own business. And they'll come up and attack you for being different at a boarding barn. What on earth is that about? That's got to stop, guys. If you're doing that to someone else at your barn, please stop. Let people be themselves with their horses. Even if they're doing it differently to you, let people do their things. And if you're that person in a boarding or livery barn,
and you're too scared to do something differently. So you're showing up at times when no one else is there. You're trying to train in driveways and quiet corners where no one can see you. I see you because I am you. I was you. I used to board publicly. Can you imagine me boarding publicly with my big hairy horse doing weird stuff like patience and relationship work? They all stopped paying attention to me until one day they said, "How did you do that?" And now I'm sitting here in front of you with a teeny tiny public platform, which might continue to grow. It's fascinating. See, we all just wanted to get into horses because we loved horses. Turns out a horse life is a people's life. And navigating the people part in horse peopleship is the absolute hardest component of this. And let me tell you, you can buy your own farm, but even if you buy your own farm and train behind your own quiet walls, those internalized voices of the hen peckers, the aggressive perfectionists, the status quo defenders will be internalized inside your body, and you will have to grapple with those even when you're trying to mind your own business. You can be minding your own business on your own farm, and someone will walk past your farm and have an opinion about what you're doing. We cannot separate ourselves, and we should stop trying to. I think what we need to do is be more ourselves, use our voices, and then when others come up against us, we need to let them know that what they're doing is inappropriate and what they're doing belongs to them and not to you. And you can say to people, "Hey, nice to meet you. Also, back up. Give me space. Back up. Give me space. Not on my watch, you don't. You don't get to change me, and I'm not obligated to change to suit your comfort. My role is to be myself." Dear listener, your role is to be yourself because your horses demand it of you. They want fully formed you in front of them at all times. Thank you for coming to my postmodernist, contrarian, uber ironic, emotional horsemanship TED Talk rant today. You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for coming and listening to this. I hope it's given you something to chew on and to consider. And having said that, I'm going to head outside and be my fully formed self with my horses today. See you next time. You've been listening to the Emotional Horsemanship Podcast. I am your host, Lockie Phillips. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and download episodes so that you can listen to this wherever you are in the world. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you being here. And I hope to see you on the pod next time.